A bizarre and unexpected earthquake struck Charles's farmland, something unheard of in this quiet region. Earthquakes simply didn't happen here, but as Charles rushed to inspect the damage, he found something far worse than cracked earth. A massive sinkhole had torn open one of his fields, revealing a tunnel beneath. And when he and a friend ventured inside, things only got stranger. But before we start, smash the like button, subscribe and ring the notifications bell so you never miss our upcoming videos. Charles had lived on this land his entire life. Like his father and grandfather before him, he knew every post and patch of soil. The farm, with its wide fields and aging barns, had been in the family for generations. His days were predictable, tending corn and beets, maintaining the property, and enjoying the quiet rhythm of rural life. Nothing ever changed out here, and Charles believed nothing ever would. But that belief was shattered one early morning. He remembered the exact time. A deep rumble jolted him awake. At first, he thought it was thunder, but when the bed shook and the walls trembled, he knew it was something else. That moment marked the end of everything familiar. This wasn't a storm. It was an earthquake. That made no sense to Charles. This land wasn't supposed to have earthquakes. He sat up, heart pounding, unsure of what to do as the house trembled around him. Tornadoes? Sure. But earthquakes? The shaking intensified, and Charles jumped out of bed, instincts kicking in. The ground rumbled with a deep, growling force he felt in his chest. The house groaned as the old wood strained against the quake. It sounded like the house itself was fighting to stay upright, and that sound chilled him more than anything. Seconds dragged on like minutes. Charles clung to the frame as fresh jolts rocked the floor beneath him. Finally, the rumbling stopped, but the silence that followed was just as unnerving. He stepped through the wreckage of his home, past broken furniture and shattered keepsakes. The roof was damaged, and cracks split across the porch, stretching into the fields beyond. The air outside smelled strange, wet soil mixed with something sharp and chemical. Charles followed the cracks until they led to a massive sinkhole in the middle of his field. Without hesitation, he called his neighbor and best friend, Tom. If anyone could help make sense of this, it was him. When Tom arrived, he stared in shock at the gaping pit. Trees that once stood tall now lay crumpled at the bottom. Strange red layers streaked the soil like glowing veins. Tom knelt at the edge, scooping up dirt. It was warm to the touch, unnaturally so. They moved to the southern edge of the sinkhole, where the land sloped downward like a ramp. It looked almost like an entrance. Charles hesitated, then decided they had to know what was down there. Carefully, the two men descended. The ground shifted beneath their boots. At the bottom, the smell hit them, a strong, sulfuric stench. Something was off. Very off. The smell thickened, wrapping around them like a damp cloth, strong, sulfurous, and clinging to every breath. The air grew warmer and heavier as they moved deeper into the tunnel, boots crunching over gravel and loose dirt. The tunnel stretched wide, nearly 15 feet across, with a ceiling high enough to stand comfortably. Its jagged walls were streaked with red soil and strange black veins that pulsed faintly in the flashlight beam. The markings along the walls weren't random. Straight lines and grooves ran in deliberate patterns. Deeper in, the tunnel widened slightly. Along the edges lay scattered debris, loose rock, tangled roots, and something metallic half buried in the dirt. The tunnel didn't feel untouched. Someone, or something, had been down there before them. The sulfur stench grew stronger with each step, burning their noses and making their eyes water. The tunnel curved gently, leading to a partial ceiling collapse. It wasn't massive, but enough to raise concern. Above, the same strange red rings in the soil hinted again at instability. Water dripped steadily from the damaged ceiling, pooling around their boots. It wasn't a flood yet, but the constant dripping was a warning. Just south of the property, the river ran close. If the tunnel extended that far, a full breach could be disastrous. Shallow puddles formed beneath them, coated with a yellowish film that shimmered like oil. The smell thickened, and the air grew harder to breathe. The film gave off a chemical stench, rotten and unnatural. They crouched for a closer look. The oily surface reeked of sulfur, stinging their lungs. This wasn't just a sinkhole. The tunnel stretched on, far into the darkness. Too far, whatever this place was. It was part of something much bigger and much more dangerous. It wasn't just under Charles's land. The tunnel stretched for miles, maybe more. It was too wide, too deep, too perfect to be natural. Something had carved this out. In a side alcove, they found burnt wooden beams buried in the dirt, some blackened by fire, others splintered. The presence of lumber was unsettling. These looked like supports, placed intentionally. One of the beams had faint markings, letters scorched into the surface. Only part was visible, MLB.co. The rest was unreadable, worn by time or heat. But it was enough. Someone had been down here. Someone had built this. As they moved deeper, the ground changed. The soil grew darker, moist, even black in places. A shallow puddle bubbled slightly, hinting at gas just beneath the surface. The smell, sulfur mixed with sharp chemicals, grew nearly unbearable. Then they saw it. A rusted pipe, split open and oozing thick black liquid that stained the soil like ink. It ran along the tunnel wall, hidden just beneath the earth. Whatever this was, it didn't belong under a farm, and it definitely wasn't safe. They followed the pipe a short distance, passing scattered metal debris. The pattern was clear now. This entire system had been built. It was no accident. Charles's mind raced. Had his land been used without his knowledge? And for what purpose? The deeper they went, the worse it felt. The tunnel walls were damp now, dripping steadily. The air was hot and close. Then came a sound, a faint, low hum echoing through the tunnel. Mechanical, rhythmic. The vibration grew stronger with each step, pulsing beneath their feet. The place wasn't abandoned. Something was still active down here. The tension thickened. They didn't speak it aloud, but both felt the same uneasy truth. They weren't alone. Eventually, they stopped. The tunnel stretched endlessly ahead. With one last look, they turned back. They would return, just not unprepared. As they walked back, their minds raced. The scorched beam with the initials, MLB, was the first solid clue. Maybe a company, maybe a cover-up. They moved carefully, avoiding loose soil, the sulfur smell still clinging to their clothes. Their boots left deep prints in the tunnel floor as they neared the exit. Charles's thoughts spun. The tools, the leaking pipe, the hidden structure, none of it belonged beneath his land. At the edge of the slope, he glanced back. That tunnel wasn't just a hole, it was a gateway to long-buried secrets. Now those secrets were out. They climbed back to the surface, clothes and faces streaked with dirt. The sulfur stench lingered like an invisible warning. They didn't notice what clung to their boots, but they should have. Something else had come out with them. Charles and Tom walked in silence toward the farmhouse, their boots crunching on gravel. The morning light had grown brighter, but it did little to ease the tension hanging in the air. Their thoughts raced too fast for words. Finally, Charles spoke. They needed to find out who or what MLB was. Tom nodded, already thinking the same. Old property records might hold answers. Maybe a company had worked this land before. But Charles had lived here all his life. No one had ever mentioned anything. If something had happened beneath his feet, it was done in secret. Then came the rumble, deep and low, vibrating through the ground like underground thunder. Both men froze. The sound grew louder, building into a violent tremor. A sudden, deafening explosion cracked through the air. The ground shook beneath them. Charles spun around, heart pounding. Smoke poured into the sky at the far edge of the field. Trees along the horizon swayed, tipped, and then vanished into the earth. Dust and debris filled the air, blotting out the morning sun. Charles stared at the destruction, fists clenched. This wasn't just illegal, it was reckless and dangerous. Amid the swirling dust, a red scrap of paper-like material fluttered down. Letters printed across it made his stomach drop. TNT. This wasn't a natural collapse, it was an explosion. Charles's expression darkened. Whoever MLB was, they were blasting tunnels under his land. They'd likely been doing this for a long time, quietly damaging and stealing ground beneath their feet. Fueled by anger, they made their way to Tom's house. Charles gripped the red scrap tightly. They couldn't go to the police with just this. They needed real evidence, documents, maps, something that linked MLB directly to the tunnel. They weren't backing down. At the door, Tom kicked off his boots, then paused. Stuck to the sole was a thick, black substance. It wasn't dirt. It was sticky, tar-like, and clung stubbornly to the tread. Something had come back with them. Something they hadn't noticed until now. The thick black substance clinging to the boot was oil. Charles confirmed it with a quick touch and sniff. The greasy residue left no doubt. Tom searched his phone, and a name appeared. Midland Land Boring Company. Known for oil and gas work, with a history of unauthorized drilling. It all fit. Someone had been using Charles's land without permission, and now the ground was collapsing from the damage. Fueled by urgency, they packed quickly. Gloves, jars, and a camera. Back in the tunnel, the air was heavier than before, thick with sulfur and oil. They found the leaking pipe again, collecting samples of the black liquid and snapping photos of the stained soil and rusted infrastructure. Every detail could be evidence. As they worked, faint flickers of light glowed deeper in the tunnel. They moved carefully toward it, staying close to the wall. The glow grew stronger, revealing a massive machine pumping oil through cracked pipes. Workers in blue jumpsuits moved between panels, focused and unaware of being watched. The operation was active and now exposed. Charles's hands trembled as he snapped photo after photo of the machine, rusted pipes, and workers in MLB uniforms. They worked in silence, focused on gathering proof. Once they had enough, they backed away carefully and climbed out of the tunnel. Their next stop, the police station. At the station, the sheriff reviewed the evidence, photos, oil samples, and video footage. Recognizing the seriousness, he made a few calls. Within hours, officers arrived at Charles's farm, armed and ready. Guided by Charles and Tom, they descended into the tunnel and found the machine still running. The workers were caught in the act and quickly arrested. None resisted. Some even revealed names, exposing those higher up the chain. The truth unraveled fast. MLB had been drilling illegally for years, stealing oil and destroying land. Within days, the company's leaders were charged and taken away in handcuffs. Charles watched as the trucks rolled out, loaded with seized equipment and arrested workers. The company's gear was confiscated, the tunnels sealed, and the oil-stained ground scrubbed clean. Riverbanks, once at risk, were reinforced with care. Investigators confirmed the extent of the damage. Charles's crops were ruined, but he received full compensation. What had once been a landscape of fear and frustration was now protected and restored. A year later, the land had healed better than anyone expected. The red soil, once tainted by oil and sulfur, had enriched the ground like fertilizer. His beet crop flourished, larger than ever before. At the field's edge, the wind rippled through lush green rows. The nightmare was behind him. Though his legacy had been shaken, it had not been broken. The land was his again, and it was thriving. Thank you so much for watching. If you enjoyed the story, don't forget to leave a like, subscribe, and ring the notifications bell so you never miss amazing tales like this one.